Hey everyone, welcome back to the All Music Matters in That podcast. I'm your host, Brian. Today I welcome two very special guests hailing from overseas. We got one in Germany and one in Great Britain. We got Tony Ross. We got Stuart from the band, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but Sfumato effect. That's Sfumato effect. How you boys doing today?
Yeah, we're good. We're good. Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for inviting us. All good.
All right. Did I pronounce the name right? I'm sorry I butchered it or anything like that.
No, it's all right. It's good.
Okay. Actually, I remember seeing that name. It was like a 1 minute song. And it was like one of those instrumental ones from like a progressive metal group I listened to, and I thought it was just one of those made up words. So
yeah.
And I guess you get to elaborate that on a second because I'm assuming it's a funny story behind it too. But how you guys been recently? What's new?
Well, not a lot new really. We just released a new single which came out on Friday, which was written by Stuart. It's called "I Don't Know Who You Are," and Stuart can tell you a little bit more about that song later. And also this month we released a song called "Fire" that keeps on burning, which came out a couple of weeks ago. So we've been pretty busy.
Yeah, we have. It's all good.
Okay. I was letting Stuart say something there, but all right, it's all good. And which part of the world are you hail from? I think Tony, are you from the other one from Germany?
Yeah, I'm originally from the UK, but I'm living in Germany, and it's a town called Essen, which is in the west of Germany. So it's near Cologne. So I'm about like 25 kilometers from Cologne. People will probably know Cologne more than the city of Essen, but it's in what's called the Ruhrgebiet of Germany, which is the industrial area of Germany. And you told me off air, you're from the Pittsburgh area, so it's pretty much similar. I mean, obviously most of German industry grew up in the Ruhr area, and it's famous for that. So that's the part of the world that I'm residing in at the moment. Yeah.
And as for me, I live in Dorset, actually, which is, for you guys in the States, the nearest big town is Bournemouth, Southampton just up the road, 20 miles away. So I'm about sort of 100 miles south of London, directly down on the south coast. And I'm just a bit 5 or 6 miles north of Bournemouth. So I go to the beach a lot down here, and it's a nice part of the world. But I'm originally from London, West London, where I was born, and Tony and I met in Hampshire as I say, many years ago. But Hampshire is kind of about 50 miles north of me, so again about 50 miles south of London for you guys over there. So I hope that helps, gives you an idea of where we are.
At least gives me a rough idea. So yeah.
Could I ask a question is this a video podcast or are we doing it on audio?
This is a video. So
okay,
yeah.
Good.
It's all good. I was like, wait, you were supposed to wait that question until later. So
no, I just wondered because I just want to take a drink of water.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. I got my water here too, so I'm gonna probably be sipping on it. So cheers.
I'm sure you'll do some editing, yeah?
No, this is a funny moment right here, so it's all good. So all right. But cheers nonetheless. And top of the evening to you, I guess you should say.
Going back to the story about Sfumato, people probably wonder where the name comes from. Stuart and I studied art and art history when we were at college together. That's kind of how we met at a college called Alton College. And Sfumato, I think, is a technical term for a particular technique related to painting, maybe Renaissance painting. Is that right, Stuart?
It is. It translates. It's an Italian expression, and it translates as soft around the edges. So artists used to make certain parts of the image soft around the edges, and that was called sfumato. And being young impressionable kids back then, like 18 years old or 17 years old, we just thought that was really cool and really kind of arty and quite rocky, and so we used it. But all these years on we've realized now it is quite a difficult name to pronounce, so it's not the best, but we had to stick with it. There we go.
Well, the band actually started out in Stuart's garage at his parents' house, and we called ourselves Pretzel Logic for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And I was inspired by orchestral maneuvers in the dark, so I bought this really, really old organ that sounded terrible and saved up enough money to get a synthesizer because I was inspired a bit by Gary Newman. And we really decided we were going to be the next orchestral maneuvers in the dark. So Stuart took on the role of playing bass and singing, and I tried to play keyboards, and that's how it all started. And then we later changed the name to That's Sfumato Effect. Well, Stuart did, actually. I had nothing to do with it.
I think it was a friend of ours at college that suggested it, but Yeah, originally it was just Tony and I. I tried to play bass and sing. We had a drum machine back then. My influences were more sort of leaning towards Bowie and people like that. But Tony's right. We were really inspired at that time. We're talking 1981 here, so we're really inspired by the burgeoning sort of, synth pop stuff that was coming out, Duran Duran and orchestral maneuvers and all that stuff that was happening at the time. And certainly Tube Army and Gary Newman was a big influence. So we wanted to try and do something like that. But we realised pretty fast that I couldn't play bass and sing at the same time very well. So we had to find a bass player, and we found John and nearby, who lived just up the road, a couple of miles away. So he joined, and the three of us carried on as a three-piece. Then we got a drummer in, didn't we, for a while? Another guy at college, who a mate of ours called Mark James, who's joined us as a drummer. He looked a lot like Stuart Copeland out of the Police back then.
Totally.
He joined us for a while. So we were a four-piece, and we gigged around the area. You're talking rural Hampshire here, so it's like pub gigs basically, and bars and stuff like that. And I had a bit of a laugh, and that was it really. Sorry, I'm hogging your. You carry on, Brian. Ask some questions because I'm hogging your airtime here.
No, I wanted to come in on that because I remember actually it was quite strange because our influences were completely different. I remember that after school or college, I would go around Stuart's house and we would just sit and listen to Led Zeppelin and AC/DC, which was not the music we were playing at all, actually. So that was quite strange, but I'm sure the influences were there too.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were.
I was going to say, did you guys take up instruments during school? Because I'm not too sure if you guys had music programs or anything like that, and you guys took up one instrument and then switched to another at some point? Is that kind of history?
Well, Tony's more the instrumentalist, so you better answering that, Tony, than me. So.
Yeah, I never had any formal training. I was just inspired by music I was listening to. So I begged my mother to buy me a really old classical guitar, totally unplayable above the 5th fret. And the strings were really terrible, but it was cheap. Coming from humble backgrounds as I do. So I never had any formal training. I just really liked music and just knew I wanted to play guitar. So that's how it all started, really. And then it was pretty much learning by doing. Meeting up with people who were older than me, who could play guitar better than me, and just sitting around and jamming and just learning from them. And, the thrill when you can play a bar chord. It took me about 6 months to be able to learn how to play a bar chord because my finger just wasn't strong enough. And that's really that was my education, listening to music and just hanging out with other people who a little bit older who could play guitar. And you would just sit there and jam away, and he would say, this chord is fantastic. It's a minor 7th. Oh, how do you play it? And then, that's basically how I learned how to play instruments, at least. But then, sorry, Stuart, go ahead.
I was going to say I was exactly the same. I got a guitar as well when I was younger, and I remember at college we all kind of learnt chords from each other. So I learned to play rhythm guitar, and we all sort of, as Tony said, we all kind of helped each other out and learned stuff. But then bizarrely, when we formed the band initially, Tony went straight onto keyboards, didn't you? Because you were really interested in synths and getting that sort of that sound, that electronic sound was really popular at that time, and Tony really wanted to focus on that. So we ditched the guitars, and didn't we? And we just went into that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly how it started. Yeah. And then, of course, with piano, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I just managed to learn to play notes and then play one note and then play a third note, which became a triad, and then just took it from there. Literally it was, bear in mind then it was sort of late 70s. It was post-punk, and the ethos was just, doesn't matter if you can't play, it's important, what you do. So it's an expression of your art. So you just make a noise, and noise is art, and art is music. And that's the kind of... Yeah, we did make a noise, and that's the direction we went in, really. So yeah,
exactly.
Well, say it always starts off pretty simple, to be honest too. I tend to be honest if it was like playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star many times on the piano, to be honest, right there too. I forget what commercial it was, but it was actually one of those. The kid ends up on stage. I guess it's like this big theater, and it's meant to be like a show, meant to be coming up, and he's playing little Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, real simple. Then the guy comes on and starts filling in everything else here too. So. That's kind of what made me think of it, to be honest, here too. But I can see that.
we're completely untaught. We didn't have any formal, training or music lessons at school at all. And in fact, my specialization is singing, and I've been a singer for a long time. But I now sing and play guitar in a covers band here. My first experience of doing that was actually when Tony and I went to record the first song that Tony had written, and we sat down with our friend, and he'd had this little home studio in his house. It was amazing, and we did the song. I played the bass, Tony played the keyboards, and then we sat down. We knew exactly, Tony'd written the words and the melody, and we knew exactly what we were going to do. But then we all looked at each other, and Tony said, "Well, who's going to sing it?" And I went, "Well, I don't know. Can you sing it?" "No, I can't sing." We looked at our friend, the engineer, and he just looked at us and went, "Nah, there's no way I can sing it. You're going to have to do it, Stu." So I did. I got up and sang it, and that's the first time I ever sung a song, and I realised, okay, I can hold a tune, I think, just about. And that was the beginning of, literally 40 odd years ago of me, being a singer, and that's what I do now. So fantastic. And you learn. You go on. You're always learning. Always learning.
Yeah, I remember our early attempts to write songs were a bit chaotic because we wrote a song actually called That Sfumato Effect. Because, Why Don't You? It's the name of the band. So we write a song that has the same title. And I just hit a couple of chords. They weren't even chords. They were just notes. I think actually they were probably octave notes. So I come up with this sound, and then you realize, of course, because no formal training. I didn't know anything about, chord sequences and chords that fit in certain keys. It was just a question of making a different noise. And I remember the end of the song just changes into this completely different tone. In fact, I was hitting the white keys, and I thought I better start playing the black keys. And I just hit this octave on black keys, and it was a complete change towards the end of the song. But that was typical of the stuff we were writing at the time. It was pretty much a musical adventure. We really didn't know what we were doing, and we got a bit better. I think we did start to structure some songs, and they started to sound a little bit more organized, and our influences came in. For example, I remember we wrote this 25-minute epic called Arabia, which has never seen the light of day, but it basically was just Genesis, a very poor attempt at writing Supper's Ready all over again. But we did try and expand ourselves, but I guess we were always limited by our lack of musical knowledge. But I think the music was honest, because we were just, as I said, we were just expressing our art, and we were just making a noise. And Stuart was just very adept at writing lyrics and coming up with a melody over these totally obscure chords that I was playing, these weird noises.
Yeah.
So it kind of worked.
I realized at an early stage that the only thing I could really do was write lyrics, and I always had this. I can hear music in my head, and I can always hear a melody. Some people have that gift, and some people don't. And I'm really lucky that I've got that. And so, yeah, what Tony says is right. I'm just coming up with, crazy daft lyrics back then because we were kids, and producing a melody above the chords, and it was good fun. I think it's really important to stress here that in Britain, punk was really massive in the late 70s. We were kind of a little bit too young to really appreciate punk because we were 15 when it was happening. But nevertheless, it was a huge influence on all of us in terms of our development, and how we ended up writing songs, as Tony says, was just like throwing anything at it, because that was the punk ethos, and it rubbed off on us a little bit. Although we didn't write or record in that style, and we didn't have that sort of punk influence too much. We did a little bit. We quite appreciated the latter end of punk, like XTC and those bands that were around towards the end of punk. We really took some messages from them, and John, certainly our bass player, really influenced by that sort of stuff. So it's really important, actually, I think, because that's really, back then, you just felt like you could do anything. You just had a go, and it didn't matter how bad it was or how good it was. So yeah.
No, I remember very much distinctly. I was very, very much affected by the punk era. The Pistols were my favorite band. I remember every single time they appeared on The Sun, and for whatever nonsense they got up to, I would just cut out the newspaper cutting and I put it on my bedroom wall. I was a big fan. But something that was really influential was what Johnny Rotten said. I think he said, you just need to know 3 chords to write a song. And I basically kind of remember that, because Yeah, that was the breakthrough moment, because before I was listening to prog bands like Yes and Genesis and King Crimson, and these people like Steve Howard, they were like gods. You thought you basically had to have some gift to be able to do this. But what punk did, it broke it down. And it, that was really important. I remember I'm reading that and Johnny Rotten saying all you need is 3 chords or something like that. So I was listening to bands like The Clash, and I was listening to The Stranglers early on. And I was really influenced by them, but that wasn't the kind of music we were doing, which was quite strange, as I said it earlier on.
Yeah.
Was like a fake Johnny Rotten for also. That was the whole thing on BBC, right? Where I guess they started cussing and throwing all those bad words around there too.
That happened in a studio in a TV studio in North London, actually, in the Euston Road. I know exactly where that happened because I've been in that studio once. And when it happened over here, when it appeared on the TV, even we as kids were like, "Wow, what's this?" It was quite shocking, even to us. So you can imagine what it did to, like, the middle-aged people at that time. They just were throwing things at the telly, and some people kicked their TV in, because they couldn't stand it. It was really, really shocking. You can't underestimate the influence of that. The impact of that. It was amazing. But yeah, there we go.
This was a true story. I remember I pre-ordered the album Nevermind the Bollocks. I'm so excited about it. And those days, we didn't have big music chains like HMV and Virgin Records, or big, multi-chain record stores. So generally it would be a newsagent's with a record store at the back. So I remember ordering it. And I remember when it was released, I went to pick it up, is that it wasn't on display anywhere. It was handed to me from under the counter in a brown bag, so that the word bollocks was actually covered. And I paid my money and it was handed over to me. And I actually walked out of the shop feeling slightly guilty, like I'd bought some pornography or something, it was really, and that's how shocking it was back then, even the word bollocks was never spoken. Now on television, the F-bomb is dropped all over the place. And you just hear it on almost any kind of crime show or movie. Yeah. But back then in the 70s, well, especially in England, I think it was a bit of a taboo.
I was going to say, I think they did like some sort of ban with Alice Cooper whenever he came through, because I think he had a picture with a snake on his body and everything.
Yeah.
And, I don't know what you guys called it too, but I guess in the States it was called the PMRC, I think was what it was called. And those were people that were like looking at music and then putting like a big stamp on it. It was kind of along the line saying like this was satanic or something. It was like, you could have done something.
Parental guidance.
Yeah.
It was called over here. Your parental guidance advised. Like, it was stamped on the LPs. Yeah.
Well, nonetheless, it actually basically made that album more popular too, because the younger kids, pretty much like yourselves, I guess, during that time as well, it was like, this is awesome. Let's go ahead and buy this stuff. It's almost like a rebellion in sort of a manner of speaking, whenever you think about it.
Yeah.
We never had a shock value. Stuart's lyrics, so you can talk about that, but they were, I think, everyday observations for him. So I don't think we even had an image. We didn't actually try and set ourselves up as a new romantic band or a punk band or any kind of band. We just wrote songs that we liked. I hit the keyboard. If it made a noise, I liked it. And Stuart wrote a lyric, and it was whatever it was. Of course, our influences were there, as I said earlier on. But we didn't try and pigeonhole ourselves into any particular pigeonhole, funny enough. But there again, the band eventually we kind of went our separate ways after a year or a couple of years. John was lured away to play for a real band called Squire, who actually were a mod revival band they were really good. They had gigs and tours, and they played big venues in London. We were just playing the local pub and club circuit, so not that many gigs either. So kind of when John went away, he was a mainstay of the band. I remember the first practice or rehearsal we had with John, I turned to Stuart and I said, wow, he makes us sound like a proper band, which he did, he really glued it together. And then we got Mark James on drums, who then, really then we actually felt like a real band for the first time. But we kind of went our separate ways after that. And then, Stuart can tell you a little bit more later about what he did musically. But so it was kind of a 2-year period when we 17, 18, 19, Stuart and I tried to get together at various times to form other bands, but it didn't quite work out. So he went his way and I went my way.
That's it.
Actually, I was going to lead into that question here too, because I'm actually curious. Because first off, you said this band formed in college, I should say, because I think the way our education systems are set up between the States and the UK, I think it's pretty much
It's
like
different.
night and day.
Yeah.
I do remember being in Oxford during like one of my trips to England, and then I remember feeling intimidated being there, to be honest, but nonetheless, it was still an honor to be there. But so you start this, and I guess we'll just say college, and then I guess what was the history like afterwards? Because it seems like what Tony told me here is like you guys went on a nice run for 2 years, and then you guys went your separate ways, and then at some point Tony ends up in Germany. So I guess what's the history like after you guys had formed?
Yeah, I'll just quickly give you my story because otherwise we're gonna go all night. So I'll sort of summarize it a little bit. I went on and played with another local band down in Hampshire there for a while, and then I met some guys. A friend of a guy in another band on the circuit said to me, "Oh, there's this guy over in Surrey who's looking for a singer," and I went to see him, and his name was Tim. We got on really well. He was a really professional musician, really good guy, really knew what he was doing. Actually, for the first time in my life, I sort of met somebody that actually was really on a different level to me and Tony, you know, and the rest of us. So I joined with him, and we formed a band. This was about 85, 86, and we spent the next 5 years in London doing the circuit. We got a publishing deal with Warner Brothers, and we played and supported a few sort of names. We did loads of work with different record companies, but we never actually got a record deal. And in 1990, after doing, I think we did the last demos we did were for Polydor. We wrote loads of material, and it was good pop stuff. And in 1990, we kind of called it a day. Really, we've been trying for so long. We're gigging the London circuit, and back, you know, playing some great venues. I played the Marquee. I played the Mean Fiddler, some really famous venues over here in London. That you know, it was fantastic to tread the boards where like people like Mick Jagger had stood 30 years before me. You know, it's that 20 years before me. It's that sort of wow, amazing. So it was good, and 1990 it ended, and I moved down to further south into the countryside with my then girlfriend, and we started a family. And I sort of stopped doing music for, well, crikey, about 15 years. So that in a nutshell, that's my story. And then obviously we'll come to how we got back together later. But yeah.
Mine was a little bit simpler. I mean, I didn't actually. Stuart went and did his thing, and and by the way, Stuart, I've never said, but you really should have made it. I've listened to his music. Pillow Fights Back was the name of the band, and he didn't say it, but I've listened to some of the stuff that they've recorded, and it was top notch. I mean, it was on a par with anything that was going around at the time. You know, if you listen to Wet Wet Wet, I hate to say the word, Stuart, I'll say them again, Wet Wet Wet,
yeah,
and bands like Spandau Ballet. I mean, it was top notch stuff. So it was. I did something completely different. I got married. As I said to you when we were off air, I moved to DC for 5 years. So lived in Washington, DC. I didn't do any music there whatsoever. And then I came back to the UK briefly, and then went to Germany. And then I decided to take up music. I met some friends through where I was working, and we decided to put a band together, and we just played covers basically. So it wasn't original music, and that's how I really got back into it. So I was playing in cover bands. One thing I've said before on other podcasts is that I really actually, to continue my music education, was learning how to play other people's songs, because you know you had to learn the chords and the structure and solos and all kind of other stuff. And by then I'd switched to playing guitar, by the way. So I'd gone back to my first love, and I was actually playing guitar. And I kind of continued on that journey pretty much. And then working in IT, which is my career, I got into obviously digital recording using DAWs, and I think they're called digital audio workstations. You know, I got into actually creating music. So I bought Logic Pro X. I started off in GarageBand, and then I just started to just record my own music just for fun. And I was doing it on my own. So I'd have a melody idea, and then I would learn how to record it. As I said, the IT thing wasn't an issue for me, so it was just another piece of software, because I work with software every day, right? And I just learned a little bit about recording techniques, and then I got back into it, and then I started to record my own song ideas. And then I moved out of Berlin because I lived for 15 years in Berlin. And then we decided that we'd had enough of the big city life. And I wanted to move somewhere a little bit quieter. And that's why I moved 700 kilometers further westwards. Berlin is about 90 kilometers from the Polish border. So it's really almost
about 400 miles in Imperial.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I've lived so long out of the UK now. I have no idea what Imperial is anymore. So, so that's how I got to that point. So I had all these ideas and some primitive 4, 5, 6 songs without any lyrics that I had recorded, and I had nowhere to go with them. So, and that's kind of how, via the wonders of social media, I got back in touch with Stuart and John again. And that's how I think the Sfumato effect story just continued.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And just real quick for the audience, can you guys just list what the current lineup is?
Yeah, currently it is me and vocals and I songwrite. Not all of the songs, but some of them. And Tony is our producer, but more importantly, Tony plays keyboards, guitar, and puts together the drum tracks and really arranges every song. So I write my songs on guitar, for example, and the song that Tony referred to earlier, we've just released, I Don't Know Who You Are. I just wrote that on guitar, put together a basic demo, send it to Tony, and then we discuss it, we talk about it, and he does all the main stuff to bring that song to life. And then finally we have John, who is our bass player. John is a professional bass player, he plays in other bands. John also writes his own music as well as Tony does too. And on the first album, we have music written by Tony, written by John, and written by me. So, yeah, there's all different stuff in there. So that's how it works. And John also would, if he got the chance, do some backing vocals as well if we ever went live. But we can't go live because we all live in different parts of the world. So, yeah, that's the lineup.
Yeah. I'm certainly doing the guitar. We do have guest appearances sometimes. There's a chap called Ben Hughes who actually played lead guitar and guitar on a track we did called Don't Come Easily, which was one of John's songs. Right, yeah. So occasionally, I think we've had 1 or 2 people lend a hand, but that's predominantly the lineup. And we don't have a drummer, so just use software. I prefer to have a real drummer, but where can you find one these days? They're and also recording them would obviously be a problem as well. So, that's the lineup.
I'll say look no further. I am a drummer, so.
Okay, well, after the show, we might be asking you to lay down some tracks. No, but John is actually playing with his own band, which is called Drums and Wires UK, and he's still active with Squire, and they've just finished a UK tour. Supporting a band called, I can't remember, Stuart, what's the name of the band? Secret Affair. Yeah.
It's a minor hit, late 70s.
Yeah. So, as Stuart says, he's a real active, professional, semi-professional gigging musician. I'm not in that space at all. So that's the lineup at the moment anyway. Myself, John and Stuart are the mainstay, the main creative force behind the whole project.
That's pretty cool. And I do have to ask, because outside of the punk scene that was coming about in like late 70s and 80s right there, I guess, how'd you guys handle when it started getting heavier and then like you start getting some of that death metal groups? I guess, did you guys ever give them a listen?
Well, I'll answer that first because, Zeppelin was my introduction to hard rock. Black Sabbath and Zeppelin they've been credited with inventing hard rock. If you think of bands that came before, Jimmy Page playing with people like Jeff Beck and even Eric Clapton and forming the Yardbirds. Of course, Zeppelin's first name, they called themselves the New Yardbirds. And then eventually they changed their name to Led Zeppelin. So I was kind of inclined to like that kind of music anyway, a sort of hard-edged, guitar-driven music. But as Stuart said, I got really heavily into synthesis and started listening to bands like Kraftwerk and Tangerine Dream and even Jean-Michel Jarre, and was very influenced by Gary Newman. And then I kind of fell in love with the guitar again when I heard an album called Reckless by Bryan Adams. And I heard that album and I thought, I really do like guitar. So I picked up my guitar again and started to get in touch with that kind of music. But in answer to your question is that I do actually like some of the metal, but there are so many different genres. So like death metal and speed metal and doom metal are not in my wheelhouse at all. But in saying that, I was influenced by a band called Linkin Park. Everyone knows who Linkin Park is. And I'm interested by the crossover. And a couple of albums by Linkin Park. The first one, which was called Hybrid Theory, is one of my favorite albums. I listen to that all the time. And I think the second album, was it called Motorola or something like that? I can't remember what it was called. But I mean, yeah, exactly. That crossover of that sort of like hard, new metal, as I think it was called. And there's a bit of keyboards, and there's a bit of pop and a bit of rock in there. I do like some of the music on the slightly heavy side, yeah. And Metallica, I listen to a little bit of Metallica. And a big influence on me and a band growing up were Rush from Canada, which were kind of, they could be heavy at times, but they were sort of like prog with a bit of metal influence and a bit of pop. Everyone knows who Rush are. So I kind of did gravitate back towards that kind of heavier music. It got me back into guitar playing again, which I quite enjoy and I'm still learning.
I don't know if Stuart wanted to add anything. I guess, did you ever get into like that heavy metal sort of music?
No, I am completely the opposite, to be honest. I stopped really listening to heavy metal stuff years ago, and in 1984 thereabouts, I'd always loved and admired David Bowie through the 70s, and so he kind of was my primary influence in terms of writing and in terms of lyrics and that sort of thing. And then in 1984, somebody said to me after a gig we'd done down in Hampshire somewhere, God, you sound exactly like Mike Scott. And I said, who's he? And he said, he's the singer he's the main guy from the Waterboys, a band called the Waterboys. And I went out and bought the Waterboys first album, listened to it, and I thought, I do sound a little bit like him, but, he's very influenced by Bob Dylan, but I really got into them. I really got into Bob Dylan and that sort of stuff. So my influences are much more almost country, if you like, than rock. And although if you see the Waterboys live, and I've seen them loads of times, they are a fantastic band live, and there's there's some really rocky numbers in there, some really good heavy guitar numbers in there. Primarily, it's about the imagery and his lyrics that really captured me. And so he's a major influence to me, along with Bowie and a few others. So I went in the direction of more pop rock bands, if you like. And so most of my influences, and certainly my writing influences, because I write pop songs, that's all I can do. I can't write a rock song. I can't write a 10-minute rock song with loads of solos in it. I can't do that at all. I write 3-minute pop songs. That's what I'm good at. So yeah, that's my influences pretty much. But my first influence as a kid was always, as Tony said, was Led Zeppelin. We went to see them in '79 and at Nebworth, and I loved them. I thought they were an amazing band, as everyone did, and particularly their drummer. He was the best drummer I've ever seen. Still to this day, no one gets quite close to Bonzo. He was something else. But yeah, so that's me really.
I would argue Neil Peart. I think he's
he's great. He's good too. Yeah, very much.
Yeah, the late great Neil Peart was a fantastic drummer, but also a good lyricist as well. He wrote a lot of Rush's fantasy melodies through, as we know, through Farewell to Kings and then Hemispheres and onwards and upwards. So Neil Peart, what a great drummer. And Rush, what a great band. But I kind of didn't go down the heavy scene. I kind of almost was very influenced, well, like most people, by bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam. So I did like that kind of hard guitar rock edge, but then was drawn more towards the grunge sort of indie scene rather than sort of going into metal. And of course, U2. I remember I used to really like the early U2 albums with the edge. I was always an effects kind of guy because I wasn't a very good guitar player. So I tried to actually hide my lack of technical ability by lots and lots of effects, whether it be flangers or whether it would be, distortion pedals or whatever. But of course, the edge is the ultimate person for playing guitar, with effects, with repeated echoes and flanges and choruses, etc. So early U2 I was very influenced by. I'm not so much later when they hit the big time. I kind of like U2 when they were a small little band, and then, it was kind of almost like a secret band that you liked. Oh, U2 are really awesome. But then, once they did Rattle and Hum and started to play stadiums, I kind of went, well, okay, they're obviously now fulfilling their record contracts, they're just writing songs because they need paychecks. And more importantly, they need need to obviously pay other people. You know, they have hundreds of people working for them, so they're writing music obviously to pay them and their families, I guess. But no, I never really went down the metal route, but I'm still influenced.
There was actually a woman I interviewed not too long ago. She's actually out of Leeds in the UK, and her husband, this is actually Stella Anderson is her name. She's part of the Stella Anderson project, so check out her music. But her husband actually had worked alongside Venom, which was one of the big British heavier metal. I guess they had some punk elements here and there, but he helped out as, I think it was a sound guy or one of the engineers, and kind of helped out. Maybe a stage guy, I'm not too sure. Sorry, Stella. So if she wants to fill it in, let us know in the comments. But that's why I brought it up here too. But I was also real big into Bolt Thrower, who was out of the UK, and they went on a nice run there for a little bit. Then unfortunately they had lost their drummer, and then that seemed to be the end of it, like right then and there. So
I do have a dirty secret. I do listen to a very, very well-known German band called Rammstein, who are very popular for obscure reasons in America and other places. Of course, they're massive here in Germany. Their videos I can't watch because they're a little bit grotesque, but the music is obviously, well, you know what the music of Rammstein's like. I mean, it's pretty hardcore heavy. And I don't think the guy is counted as a screamer or a shouter, but he's not far away. So I mean, I do a plug now for my radio station, the Ross House of Music. I have a radio station goes out every Friday, 8:00 p.m. Central European time and 2 p.m. Eastern. And I get lots of submissions, and boy, do I get a lot of metal. I literally get 20 submissions a week from metal bands, and that's proof to me that in the independent scene, there's a really healthy sort of metal scene. Actually, people are still recording and making this stuff. You know, there's a very good band out of Berlin called the Factory of Art. There's a band based from the States called Paralandra. I'd recommend you look them up. They're really, really good sort of not hardcore, but hard rock bands. So metal is alive and well, but I don't think it's influencing my music. When I write music, if I'm writing it on guitar, it's probably more as an accompaniment to something I've written on piano or keyboards. So by definition, it's not going to be heavy metal if I'm writing it on a piano. So, but no.
Close enough. But actually, say no more. I know Factory of Art. I've actually interviewed their guitar player.
You've actually? Schultz. They are awesome. I do like. They've just released a new album. And the guy writes to me all the time. I forget his name. And the new single, which I played last night or the other night, is really, really good. It's a really weird combination of. There's a new genre called progressive metal, which I'm fascinated because it takes all the elements of the music I loved growing up, like prog, like Yes and early Genesis and King Crimson and some of these other guys, you know, and it actually presents it in a metal format. And I think Factory of Art actually do that very, very well. So you'll have to give me the link to that, because if you've interviewed him, I'd like to listen to the podcast.
Toralf Schultze, I think that's how you pronounce his name. Yeah, he's a guitar player, and then I think his name was Marco Mueller. That was the guy.
Marco Muller. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, he was the guy who was I guess their PR guy or social media guy, whoever you want to call it. But yeah, I've interviewed him, and
oh, cool. I'll check that out, because I do. It's an interesting crossover. And I can listen to it, but I wouldn't play it and I wouldn't write it. Put it like that. But I think that's most. I mean, Jimi Hendrix once said his favorite instrument was the harpsichord. You know, so I mean that demonstrates the point. I mean, you can be into different genres, but you wouldn't necessarily write it or play it. But we're all influenced. I think that's the key.
That's for sure too. Okay. I'll send you a link afterwards here too, so stay tuned for that. But I do have to ask about about COVID here too, and this goes into the next question. So I guess Tony, where were you at when COVID started picking up? Were you still in Germany at the time?
Yeah, I was still in Germany. I was actually based here in Germany. So when COVID started, I was sitting here in 2019. I think it all kicked off, and I was actually here in Germany. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess we'll start with Stuart here too, because
as me, my daughter lives in London, and I'd gone up to London in February 2020 to see her. And it's the last time I went out in a bar in the evening with her and some friends. And I remember coming back, and it started kicking off in March 2020, and I was living in Dorset, where I am now at the time, and the initial sort of impact of it was a bit kind of disbelief, like most people. It's like, oh my God, what is going on here? And I just thought, you know, this is going to be nothing. It'll be over in a few weeks. And it just, well, how wrong was I? But so I was here.
Now, for the question right here, I guess, how bad did COVID impact you personally, family-wise, and then music-wise? I guess whoever wants to start, go ahead.
Yeah, I can answer that easily and quickly, because it actually was a massive bonus for me, because that first 6 months when we were all in our houses and not really doing much and going into our gardens, and I built a lot of stuff in the garden. We could go and buy timber for some reason, but that was about it. But it made me pick up my guitar again, and I hadn't picked up my beloved. She's right here, my beloved Gibson on the wall up here. My Epiphone Dove, which I've had for 26 years. Made me pick her up again. She's called Ruby because she's red. And I started playing again, and I remember standing in front of my songbook and starting to play and sing again, and that was huge. That was really important, and that started it for me. And after that, no looking back, I knew that I'd had to get back into music.
Yeah, I think it was about this time too, because we were all forced to be indoors, that we this was the start of the rebirth of the band. That's Sfumato effect. John found both of us, I think, on Facebook, and we quickly, obviously, made contact. And then it was, hey, remember we used to be in a band? I've got these 2 songs. I had a song that I'd written that didn't actually have a title, but it ended up being Where Are the Angels and appeared on our debut album called Where Are the Angels, and another song that I'd written, a musical piece that started out on guitar, but then I transposed it and made it a piano song, which was quite painful, actually. But it took a while, and that ended up being on the same album it was called I Can See Your Face. So we had these 2 songs, and we started to work on them. And that was actually, I think, around about 2016, 17, 19. I can't remember. It was around about COVID.
About 17, 18, just before COVID, when we started working on those songs and a few others. And then we sort of had a bit of a lapse for a while. And then COVID happened, and we really kicked off again. The 3 of us really got together, because all the technology suddenly came into place with Teams and all these. Skype was already there, but all these different methods of being able to record remotely and send our stuff to each other. That was really, suddenly the technology kicked on. So we just took that advantage and just thought, we got to do this, guys, and we're all really keen on doing it. So we started really working on. I'd written the lyrics and the melody to Where Are the Angels and to I Can See Your Face. John contributed a song called Sweet Scented Cherry Bomb that he'd written, and then I contributed 2 or 3 more songs from my back catalogue a little bit. So, and we worked from 2020 through to 22 when we released it, didn't we?
Yeah, it was released in December 2022. That's right. Yeah. And credit must be given. I mean, at this time, of course, I was trying to perfect the home studio recording thing, and I was influenced by a couple of YouTube channels. One was called The Recording Revolution, which was hosted by Graham Cochran at the time. And one of the things that came through was that you didn't need thousands and thousands of equipment to start recording your music at home. You could just start with real budget equipment. And that's how I started. Yeah. So I thought, this is what I'm going to do. So I watched endless videos on YouTube. And then there was also Joe Gilder, who also has a channel called the Home Studio Corner. It's called Home Studio. Yeah, it's called Home Studio Corner. And they just talked about and had short videos about recording techniques and the principles of obviously recording, how you go about mixing. And I learned an awful lot. And this all coincided with, the band getting back together. So it was like a natural evolution. Stuart was sending me demos. I was writing the odd bits and pieces of music. And I was learning how to bring it all together with all the equipment that I have, learning about home recording. And it was a bit like the old days when we just formed a band and we didn't know how to play, but we wrote songs and we made it up as we went along. So it was kind of the same thing, but 40 years later, here we were, probably better musicians, a little bit older and a bit wiser. But again, we were just kind of, I was producing and recording and mixing music and making it up as I went along. What's compression, or how do you compress a vocal? What's EQ,
You were always really quite keen on the technical side of recording and putting stuff together. So it was no surprise to me personally that Tony suddenly took on this. I want to do this. I'm an engineer, but I've got to say he worked so hard at, learning and becoming really, really proficient as an engineer and later as a producer as well. And everyone we've played the album to, certainly down here at my end, has said, "Who produced that? That's amazing." It really is. credit to him. It was fantastic. Loads of work went into that.
Well, it was a journey, and I know that I can hear in for example, the latest single that we released, I Don't Know Who You Are on Fire. I can hear myself the progress that I possibly made. But yeah, I'm really proud of the album Where Are the Angels, because one, we completed it, and it was a real sense of achievement. And I remember that one of the things that motivated us was that we always wanted to record an album, and that was the thing. We thought, one thing we're going to do before we die is we're going to actually have an album, and we're going to release it, and it's going to have our name on it. And that was an achievement in itself. But it has been a bit of a journey. So yeah, learning by doing. I made all kinds of mistakes on the album Where Are the Angels technically, but I say this to a lot of people. I'm always on forums, or I'm always on live chats with people. For example, on PreSonus, I use a lot of PreSonus equipment, and people will talk about techniques and EQing and compression and side chaining and all kinds of techniques with regard to music production. But the listener at the end of the day doesn't care what you used, doesn't care what EQ you used, doesn't care whether it was a vintage EQ, whether it was a parametric EQ, doesn't care whether it was an LA2A or an 1176 compressor. All they hear about is the song. Yeah. The song is important, and that's what I always preach. So yeah, there's a lot of technical work that goes into obviously the production behind the scenes, but if nobody likes the song, then they don't like the song.
I think that's a really valuable part of your makeup, is that you recognise on every bit of material that we produce, you recognise the song is the key thing here, and we've talked a lot about on every song about how we're going to how we're going to make it sound, and how Tony always asks me, okay, what's the signature tune for this song? Give me some reference songs for it, and I generally do. For me, the making of that album, my journey was Tony's journey was really technical, and he wanted to learn to be a producer, and he is now a great producer. My journey was I wanted to learn to write again, because I hadn't written songs on my guitar for many, many years. And that album was really important because it included one song that I wrote in 2021 called The Girl from Devon, about my gorgeous wife who is out there, Claire. But it's the first time I'd picked up a guitar. I'd had the melody in my head, and I picked up a guitar and I'd worked the song out, and I'd worked it all out on the guitar and written it. And it's the first time I'd done that. And that was really cathartic for me because it kicked me on. And since that time, I've now written 7 or 8 songs, which for me is huge and massive, because that's what I love doing. And yeah, so my journey's been very much about becoming a writer again, and Tony's has been about also Tony writes, but generally about becoming this incredible sort of production guy that can just do all this stuff that we could never have done all those years ago. So yeah, it's been brilliant.
Yeah, I remember one of the highlights of the album Where Are the Angels for me was that I learned the technique to get a gated drum sound. And because everyone knows that Phil Collins In the Air Tonight gated drum sound, which was engineered by Hugh Padgham, partly by design, partly by accident, I think, and is now trademark, synonymous with the 80s. And of course, that kind of In the Air Tonight drum solo at the end. But Stuart actually sent me a demo of a song called which one was it, Stuart? Was it Mr. Heartache? It was Mr. Heartache, which is a song that I think he wrote in the back in the 1990s. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he sent me over the demo, and he does this mouth boombox thing going boom, boom, boom. And when I first actually produced the song, I included the audio demo that he sent me. And I remember he came back and said, no, that was just supposed to be some kind of scratch track. I didn't actually want you to do that. I actually want you to actually, produce some real sounding drums. And then I thought, okay, well, I was inspired. I'm going to have to learn how to get this gated drum sound. So I got a drum sample down, and then I learned the technique. So as Stuart says, I developed as a producer, but maybe more as an engineer. And there were lots of landmarks in that album along the way, because it was recorded over a 2-year period. So I think actually technically, in terms of playing and producing and recording, the songs on the second side, for example, we get to Pandora and Mr. Heartache and The Girl from Devon, I think they were slightly better produced and recorded tracks than some of the earlier ones, because the early ones, most of the tracking would have taken place about a year and a half earlier. So it was actually a journey of discovery and adventure. I think that's why I love the album so much.
Yeah.
I see. Just real quick, did you guys have any brushes with COVID? Did any of you guys get real sick?
No, I didn't. No, not at all.
No, I'm COVID free, thank God. I haven't had it yet.
I've had it twice, but the first time it was so mild, I didn't even know I had it. And the second time, slight sort of flu-y symptoms, and went after a few days, dead lucky. I've had other things to deal with, as so has Tony, which we won't go into, but much more heavy than COVID.
Yeah, that's for sure. And hopefully the wife's not eavesdropping on the conversation, listening outside that door. Yeah. But all seriousness, jokes aside and everything, it's good to see you guys are doing well there too. So good to have you guys around here for the ride. So
no, thanks. It's a pleasure being here.
Yeah.
No worries. And just real quick, how's the music scene been? Because this is one I always like to ask too, because in some parts of the States, especially in spots that was like in Florida and in New York, those were sites that were like real booming, or like the music scene was, particularly also going back to like heavy metal, that sort of stuff. So I guess where you guys are at, how's the music scene been like before COVID and after COVID?
Well, I think if you, I'll cut in there, just to give you my view on this. The problem in the UK that I've seen is that there aren't any bands. There's so many solo artists now. There's so many singers, songwriters, solo artists. Everything is completely reliant on social media here. Or if you don't do that, you have to gig, and you gig, extensively. That there's so many bands gigging, artists gigging, but there are so few really good bands. You have to really search for them. There are one or two, the 1975 and people like that came out a little while ago, good bands, but generally speaking, I think that's why so many people are looking back to the older bands like the Waterboys, like the bands that have been around and that block a few times and been around for 30 years, that are still doing it live, because they really are good live. But yeah, it's a real weird thing, this, because during COVID, before COVID, I don't think it was necessarily any different. There's so many solo artists, the Adele stuff, the kind of Ed Sheeran of this world. There's so many artists copying and doing that sort of thing, and it becomes, for me, just like, oh crikey, I don't want to listen to this. I want to hear a band again. So that's my observation on it.
Yeah, not too much. I would say that from my time in Berlin, there's a big club scene in Berlin. So sort of techno, I can't even say it, techno and trance and club and dance music is very, very big. Or it's metal. I mean, obviously we talked about Factory of Art. There's another band called King Ern. I don't know whether you've picked up on them. They're another sort of like up and coming sort of metal band. So there's nothing really in between. I mean, there's very few metal bands that make it into mainstream in Germany. Rammstein is probably one of the few exceptions. And I think during COVID, obviously a lot of people couldn't play. And I think in this area is that a lot of venues have had a lot of problems trying to pick up. Some of them have gone out of business too, because during COVID they could obviously, their major source of income was having live music, and they weren't able to do that for 5 years. So eventually they've shut up and they've gone home. I would be fascinated to know what's happening in Berlin, but I kind of left before COVID struck. But my impression is that, like Stuart said, is there are just too few bands actually now breaking into the mainstream charts. Even if such a thing exists anymore with streaming. And it's all to do with individual artists, or there'll be like studio acts and studio bands that basically you have somebody who is a good singer, but the music will be written by somebody else, they'll be produced by somebody else. And then that's all packaged, and then they go on tour through Germany. And there aren't that many bands around anymore, unfortunately. I certainly don't know of many sort of German bands that are coming through here that, one could make it, so to speak, in Germany, but even internationally, I'm not too sure.
I've got a 30-year-old, a 30-something, 33, 2-year-old son, and I've got two stepsons as well in their early 30s. And it's telling for me how many times when we're all together at Christmas or whatever, and I put on some music and I'll play something from a band in the 90s or 80s, like, I don't know, can't think of a name at the moment, but I'll put something on and they'll pick up on it and go, oh, great tune. Yeah, I love this band. they listened. That these guys are listening to music that we listened to in their early 30s. Now, back then, when we were younger, if we'd listened to what our parents were listening to, it would have been like, what the hell's that? That's rubbish. That's swing or jazz or something, or So
Yeah, exactly.
for me, that is telling. It's like they're not really reaching out to new bands, because other than if you're really a Foo Fighters fan or another massive band fan, there's not really that much coming through that really grabs you, because music, to get your music out there, as we've seen, is such a nightmare today, because it's flooded, in social media. It's flooded with everyone trying to get out there. It's so competitive that bands aren't coming through the way they used to, the way they were really sponsored by record companies and really pushed and gigged and toured, and it just isn't happening, and that really frustrates me a little bit.
I guess the other thing too would also be in terms of AI, and then this can tie in with like one of the questions here too. But let's start with AI here, because I think the way you're seeing some of it nowadays is like some guys are using AI just strictly to like make the music for them, and maybe they'll contribute like a little bit here and there too. But I guess with AI going around here too, I guess would you say that's one of the challenges you guys face today as musicians, or I guess what other challenges do you guys face?
It's not so much AI. Of course, in the circle that I move in terms of audio production, it's quite a controversial subject, but people make it more controversial than it actually is. Yes, of course, I'm using AI. You probably could just, I don't know how to write lyrics, so I'll go on to ChatGPT and I'll type in, write me a song about, breaking up or something, and then it will just spit out a load of lyrics for you. They probably won't be very good, but you can do it. There are certain pieces of software where you can now just get the software to actually play the piano accompaniment or the drums for you. I mean, so yes, AI. The challenge for musicians, I think, for AI to be truly, to stay within your art, is to use it as a tool, but not use it as the creative tool. I mean, for example, I've used AI very sparingly in some of my audio production techniques. But in terms of assisting to where I want to go to create a sonic sound, not necessarily just saying, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do, I'm just going to let AI create it for me. And sometimes in terms of workflow, AI can actually speed up your workflow. So that's quite attractive too, because I mean, us mix engineers spend days, even weeks, preparing a mix and getting the tracks together. But if you can use a bit of AI, maybe just to do a bit what we call stage gaining, or I think it's called gain staging, which is just basically to get all the right input levels for all the tracks when you're preparing a mix session. If you can have an AI tool that does that for you, say in 15 minutes, and it saves you sort of like 2 hours work, then I think that's a good use of AI, because then what I want to do is get to a point when I'm actually sort of like recording and making and releasing music. So anything can speed that up is obviously good. But the danger side of the coin, of course, is that you just use it as a shortcut, and that just totally kills creativity. And I think that's the challenge for musicians. You need to kind of recognize when to use AI as an aid, and when not to use it as your main creative spark, because then it's just not good, in my opinion.
No, I think I look at my great heroes musically, and I think it'd be very interesting to see what David Bowie would have made of this. For example, I think he would have found a way of using AI, in a more creative way than everyone else, because he always did that. But speaking personally, from my perspective, as all I do is write lyrics and music and on my guitar. As a writer, to me, music is human and it cannot be anything else. And if I can't express a message and try and move somebody with the lyrics that I write, then I'm not going to even bother. So I have no conception of, taking something off any sort of digital platform to help me create. No way. I'm totally old school, and I always will be. Music comes from here and here. That for me, that's it. There's no other. I think, as Tony says, it can be of use in a technical sense, but certainly in a creative sense, absolutely no way.
I'll take care. Get a little King Kong pound in the chest like that. It comes from here. Right here. But you're all right. think most people got a little ticked off because one particular heavy metal group that recently came out with a new album called Deicide, they seem to take a lot of heat because they thought they were using AI for like their album artwork. So I guess, do you just use AI for like the drum patterns, or are you using it for any artwork, or I guess what else do you use AI for in your music?
I use it just mainly for audio production, and then, as I said, just as a tool for my workflow to get me to places faster. I'm not going to. This is not a technical podcast, so I'm not going to go into the boring technical stuff that I do. But I do actually use AI sparingly. For example, if you master music, there's a piece of software that you just hit a button and it analyzes your music, and it will come up with all the necessary technical settings in terms of EQ and compression and limiting that you need. And of course, that's an AI algorithm that then will basically sort of take your music and then try and match it to hundreds and thousands of millions of other mixes. And then it will try and push your sound and your music towards that particular sound to fit that particular genre. I'd never do that, for example, but sometimes you can just hit the button and then you could see basically where you need to be in the ballpark. So if you're trying to create a sound, for example, I'd like that to sound like Simple Minds. And you can then use AI to maybe push your music towards that EQ curve to get that particular sound. And then you can say, okay, that's where I need to go. But generally what I would do is I would just use that as a guide, and then I would scrub it, and then I would do my own engineering, and then I would know where I need to go. But to completely rely on it, I would never do that. So I'm using AI a little bit in that sense. But in terms of writing music, I don't use it at all. I mean, I'm going to play everything that I play badly or, well in terms of guitar and keyboard. So I'm not using any AI in terms of creating music, just purely from an audio production standpoint. And artwork, there is some great artwork, actually. This is actually an area for me that, again, an artist would probably shoot me on the spot. But I don't see any particular problem with creating really cool artwork using AI. Because then what I understand from AI artwork is you have to have an image anyway. You have to type in the words and say what you want to see. I want to see a dragon and a castle and a knight walking up to it, surrounded by fire, slaying it, and then AI will actually then create the picture for you. So for somebody who doesn't have any art skills, maybe that's something good. But there again, an artist might say, hey, you're doing me out of a job, man. What are you doing? All this AI, I'll do that for you. I don't have a career anymore. So, I mean, there's probably pros and cons, but all the artwork that we've produced have been from photographs. So we haven't actually produced any AI images yet. I know a lot of bands that I see with my work on my radio station who are releasing records, and they submit to me, they're sending me all the PR packages and the electronic press kits, and I can see a lot of artwork is AI generated. So, but, fine. I don't see any reason why that's a bad thing. It could be controversial for reasons I just said, but we don't use AI in any of our artwork. It's pretty much straightforward text and photographs.
Guys, what about the band logo itself? Because what I'm seeing here on Messenger, that's Sfumato effect. I was just curious how you guys made that one.
That's not AI. That's just a simple template. It's taking actually an existing logo and then just putting our words in it. We actually, funny enough, is we did try to initially. A very good old school friend of ours, Mark Roberts, who's a very talented artist. He actually operated our drum machine way back in the 80s. We used to tell him what buttons to press, and we had this old Roland sort of bossa nova drum machine that we used on all our tracks. And we used to give him a sheet of paper, and we used to give him a pint of Guinness and sit him in the corner or whatever and say, press this button at this point in the song. But he actually is a fantastic artist. And early on, we did actually have some artwork submitted to him. We did have a logo, and we had some album and artwork. We didn't end up using it for whatever reason. But that's a good question. Maybe I'll have to talk to Stuart offline about that. Maybe for future releases, we need to get him on board again. But no.
Well, say you can't go wrong with doing a pint of Guinness as compensation for your work. So
yeah, that was it. Yeah.
But hey, if it worked, it worked. So that's all teammates. So that's all good. Okay. So I don't know if the UK, let alone Germany, is doing anything to like maybe regulate AI. I guess has anything kind of maybe come up about it?
I did hear somewhere in Germany that the government here is considering, obviously, not obviously, that's the wrong word, it's not obvious at all, are actually looking into AI and the application of it. I'm not too certain. I did read something, and I think it has nothing to do with music. I think it's more to do with social media and interaction with social media and the use of AI and across all technologies. But the German government is actually looking to regulate it, I think, and the European Union are looking to regulate that as well.
I guess is the UK doing anything, Stuart, or are they still too busy rioting, to be honest?
I don't know, Brian. I honestly don't know. It's not something that I keep an eye on at all, to be honest with you. Yeah, can't answer that question.
Well, it's getting a little chaotic over there too. You guys been okay recently? Because I think there's been some riots that kind of broke out in and around London. Was that what was going on?
Yeah, it's the press, to be honest with you, as usual. There was a dreadful murder of three kids up here, which was again, it's not the press. Sorry, I should have said it's social media that's caused this, and it's just ridiculous social media stories being spread about this guy was has come across here as a refugee and on a boat, and he's gone into the public and stabbed these kids. It's complete nonsense. And the far right over here, because we now have a socialist government which is kind of like slightly left of centre, bit like the Tories are more right, the Conservative Party over here. So yeah, Democrat more than Republican. And over here, those people have taken to the streets because they've been incited to do so, and the far right want to just flex their muscles. And to be honest with you, it's utter nonsense. The police have got it completely under control, and there's been 1,000 arrests. They're imprisoning people because it's just got to be stopped, because it's social media that's causing this problem. It's got there's no other cause to it, and it's just one horrible isolated incident that they've taken to use as an excuse to incite everyone, and yeah, it's rubbish.
We had a similar movement, different circumstances, not relating to a murder, but about 6-7 months ago, there's a party in Germany called the Alternative for Deutschland, and they're right of centre. Yeah, so they're obviously advocating, leaving the European Union. Obviously, they want tighter controls on immigration. They have sort of links to neo-Nazis in some parts of Eastern Germany. You've had people who've basically praised, obviously, the Nazi regime. And they're quite controversial, but we recently had a similar thing, and I think one of the party members said that anybody who wasn't German should just be deported, and that was enough. So the parallel was in England. I think what Stuart quite rightly said is that this was agitated by the right-wing media in the UK, and we had riots, but an awful lot of people came out and said, no, I mean, enough's enough. These people don't represent who we are. And I think last weekend there were quite a lot of demonstrations in the UK for people who just came out on the street and said, we're taking back our streets, and we just, we are the majority, you are the minority. And a similar thing happened in Germany when this rather controversial statement from this far-right politician came out. I even went out on the streets too. I went out with my wife, and we went out and we demonstrated, and we just literally took over the streets, and we just said, we are more, we're more than you. And there was this huge backlash against the AfD and this kind of right-wing popularism. And it worked. And I think actually that's made my only experience with it, because obviously we didn't have anything as tragic as a murder, but rather disturbingly, what's happened in the police is that Germany is organized in local government, so it's a federal government. So although we have like a general government that obviously sets all the rules, they can be interpreted locally. So each particular part of the country has its own state, if you like, and they have a certain amount of leeway in how they govern. So they have their own justice minister or home affairs minister or secretary of state or whatever you want to call it. And he rather controversially came out and said that basically, well, now what they're going to do is that every time that someone commits a crime, is they're going to actually declare their nationality first. And this is also quite controversial, because, it doesn't matter. It's not relevant. His excuse was, of course, that the police, the police always call us and ask and say, is he a refugee? Is he a migrant? So basically he said, we can't keep answering that. We're just going to tell people now in all the crime statistics, when someone commits a crime, they're of this nationality. So, and that's quite controversial, and people are obviously upset about that, obviously, because the implication is what's it got to do with anything? And also, again, it's pandering to right-wing popularism. And the other thing, of course, is, we don't need to label people, irrespective of where you come from, if you commit a crime. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're Albanian or whether you're German or whether you're French. It's a crime is a crime. And so we do actually, although, to answer your question, we didn't have this powder keg, these terrible murders in Southport. I think actually there are a lot of parallels, that's running with this right-wing popularism here in Germany. That's the same in the UK. And of course, right-wing politics in Germany doesn't actually have a good history. 1933, 1945. So it's even more sensitive over here, of course. So it makes a lot of press, and
Do whatever we can to make the press happy. So I can see
no, exactly.
All right.
So go on, Brian, ask us a musical question.
I know. But in all seriousness, it's good to see you guys are doing well too. So keep the haters at bay. That's what we need to say. So just leave it at that. All right.
Yeah.
Stay safe out there too. All right. But I know you mentioned about some of the gear that you guys have here too. So let's get into that a little bit here. So I guess Tony, because I guess he's got the green screen. He's got, I guess, Focusrite behind here. So I guess what kind of gear do you got there, Tony? And then we'll get to Stuart. Yeah,
well, mainly I'm a bit of a PreSonus fanboy. Mainly because it's a long story. I use Logic Pro X because I'm a bit of an Apple boy, a bit of an Apple fanboy too. But then for some reason I wanted to upgrade my studio PC, and I thought, I don't want to pay, a mortgage to upgrade my PC. I'm going to switch to Windows. So of course, Logic Pro X doesn't work on Windows, so I switched to Studio One. Which is cross-platform, so you can use it on Windows and you can use it on Mac and MacBooks. But then, of course, I just gave up and I said, I really am an Apple fanboy. I can't really work with this Windows PC. So I got my Mac Studio, which did cost a mortgage in the end. It costs a lot of money, but it's a really, really good PC. So I'm using a Mac Studio M1. With the Max, not the Ultra. So, but it does everything I need to do. It's 2 years old, but it's a beast of a machine, and it can handle everything I throw at it. And apart from that, I really didn't have much of gear. And when I moved back to Mac, I shockingly didn't decide to use Logic Pro X again. I'm going to carry on with PreSonus. So all my hardware is PreSonus. So I've got a simple sort of 8-channel mixer. Home studio mixer, which obviously I use if I ever record anybody in studio. I can just take a line in. I can record people live, whether it's vocals or guitar. I've got a MIDI controller, which is a bit like a small mixing desk. It's kind of they call it a production controller. So I've got the Fader Port 8 from PreSonus, because although with a mouse, you're mixing and you're moving all the faders with the mouse, this thing has sliders on it, so you get this really tactile feeling. You feel you're in a studio. So I often use it, for example, when I've condensed really, really big mixes, say like 60 tracks, I mix them down to essentially 6 elements, like guitar, bass, keyboards, vocals. And then I literally will do the mix. I just reduce it all down, like a 60-track session. I'll reduce down to about 8 faders. And then I'll just, then slide the faders up, and you get that tactile feeling, and it's really, really nice. So I've got that. I've got other MIDI controllers, which are basically pad-based things for drums. So I use the Atom SQ, which is a PreSonus kind of drum pad where you can just type patterns in. And then I've got an older version of the same thing. And that's basically the sort of the equipment that I'm actually using. Or the microphone's going through a podcaster. I've got a Zoom P8 podcaster, which I use for my live radio shows, because I do a live radio show too, which I've mentioned before. So I'm using that to speak through now, and I use that obviously then to stream my live radio show. In terms of guitars, I don't own a Gibson, I don't own a Fender because I'm not rich, but I've just got a few guitars, and I tend to use them all for different occasions. I guess my favorite is I bought a Mexican Fender Stratocaster. So it's a Squier version, but back then, I think before they closed the factory in the 1990s, they're actually using original Fender parts. So it's a really good guitar, and that guitar I purchased it in 1994, which is a millennia ago, and I still use that. And that's probably the original piece of kit I've got. I kind of use that an awful lot, but recently I've been using, I'll show you. I've been using this. So I've been using this, which looks like a Gibson E355, but it's not. Of course, it's an Epiphone, and it's a copy. But I'm kind of using this a bit inspired by the Foo Fighters, because I know that David Grohl actually uses this kind of sort of like semi-acoustic sort of electric a lot, and I do like the tone that comes out of it. So I've actually used this on the I Don't Know Who You Are and on Fire. I recorded all the guitar tracks exclusively using that guitar. I just put it back. And then I've got a Les Paul Standard from Epiphone again, which I use most of the time. In terms of keyboards, I just use virtual instruments. So I'm just, I don't have any real keyboards that I actually use. So I'm actually using analog. I think it's called Analog Lab 5 from Arturia, which has some great keyboards synths in it, and I use that quite a bit. I do actually have a couple of old synthesizers from my old days. I've got an original Roland D50, which you can just see the corner of there. That's a vintage synth from the 1980s. So, and I still have that miraculously. Although I had to change the battery the other day. The battery finally, that holds all the memory, it finally ran out after like 38 years or something. The battery just died. And then I had to literally pull the whole thing apart just to replace this little sort of lithium battery about this big. So that's mainly that's all the gear that I use. I got a couple of Adam Audio speakers. I think Adam Audio make really, really good studio speakers. They're a German company, and I've got the budget range. And I've got a whole load of microphones, PreSonus microphone here, and some other microphones. I've got a Rode Podcaster microphone. And you see, gear's my favorite thing. You really asked me the wrong question.
Yeah. Good tell. Right. Yeah, Stuart, can you try to match that?
Yeah,
oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say that's it for me. I mean, the problem is I spent a fortune on gear, and I don't get so hung up on it. I probably would like to spend more, but it just gets the job done. At the end of the day, it's the music. Nobody cares what I'm using.
It's fairly true, isn't it? I don't see the backroom stuff. For me, as I said earlier, by the way, I'm going to have to leave after this. I've answered this question because my dinner is ready. How rock and roll is that?
You got to eat, man.
Yeah. So I'll show you. This is my 26-year-old Gibson Hummingbird copy. It's Epiphone Dove. And they don't make it in this color anymore, and it's so old now. It's got a fantastic tone, and I play this quite a lot in my gigging band. I've also got the guitar I write most on, to be honest, is a Fender Slimline Telecaster, which is Sunburst, which I absolutely adore, and I write a lot. Yeah, it's a lovely guitar. And I've had that for about 15 years. And only this week, in fact, yesterday, I bought a 12-string, which is made by a company called D'Angelica, which originally was a New York-based guitar maker. And I bought a 12-string electroacoustic, which I haven't got in the room downstairs, and so I've just had it set up, and I've just literally started playing it, and I'm going to be playing that on some of the songs in my gigging band, and that sounds amazing. In terms of my live stuff, I've used a Boss Katana amp, which is just over there behind me, and Shure SM58 mics, that sort of thing, and in the studio, what I've got here when I record, I use Mac. I've got a Mac Air, MacBook Pro, sorry. And I use the Focusrite Scarlett interface with it, and I've got PreSonus speakers and various other bits and pieces for when we record that Sfumato stuff. If I do anything at home, I'll record on that format. But I've taken to recently recording in a pro studio in Wimborne near me with a guy that I know quite well now, and it just sounds a million times better than the gear I've got here, which is relatively basic. So yeah, for me, it's all about getting the vocals sounding really good now, and that really does need a proper mic worth several thousand as opposed to several hundred. So yeah, that's me basically, and as I say, I'm going to have to sign off, guys. I'm really sorry, but that's about as far as I can go. So unless you've got any other quick questions,
just real quick, just one more question, real quick, and just so that we get it all in here too. And Tony, you can cover this question when we get to the end. But Stuart, real quick, I guess, what message of hope would you give to musicians and people out there to close it out as we move forward in a post-COVID world?
I would say That's a very difficult question to answer, but I would say follow what you feel inside. In terms of, I can only speak as a writer because that's really all I do. In terms of, I would say don't be embarrassed about writing anything down that comes into your head, first of all, because sometimes you come up with nonsense and you think, oh, I'll just dismiss it. Don't do that. Speak it into your iPhone or your device. Talk into your device, record any ideas, like in the old days we used to on a notepad. Record anything you think of lyrically and even melody wise. I quite often, walking along with the dog, I'll sing something. I'd say don't be embarrassed by any thought that comes into your head. Put it down, because one day it'll come back and you'll think, oh, I could use that. And I would also say, just everything you do it from the heart. Don't be embarrassed about using your influences and admitting that you are influenced by people. I'm influenced by David Bowie, Bob Dylan, the Waterboys, various people. Don't be embarrassed about it. We all are. The Beatles, if I could write a song like Paul McCartney wrote a song, I'd be a very happy man. Don't be embarrassed about it. I aspire to doing that. So that's my advice.
Right. Spoken like a true prodigy. So, all right. I don't want to hold you up any longer, so make sure you get out there and tell the wife and kids we said hey. So.
Okay, thanks ever so much, guys. It's been really, really good. So nice to see you, and thanks, Brian, for all of that. And yeah, see you another time, hopefully.
No worries. And God bless and stay safe, mate.
Bye.
See you, Stu. Yeah, so I'll just go back and answer that question. I mean, it was a very good question, actually. And my answer would be, it's pretty simple, because one of the questions that I always ask myself is, why bother? Why make music? I mean, who cares, right? At the end of the day, I mean, why? And I think the question is that I think the advice I would give is just do it for yourself, write music for yourself. Don't chase the algorithm. Don't chase the Spotify playlist. Clicks and popularity are overrated. And my advice would be is to just create something because you want to create it. And I think that's basically enough. I think if you can accept that's enough. Yes, of course, we all want other people to hear our music. But if you can just get comfortable with the fact that what you're creating has some value, as long as it has value to you, then it's valuable. That's my opinion. And that's really it, because sometimes I do sit here and I think I've got all this gear and I'm doing all this music, and why am I doing it? And at the end of the day, who really cares? Who really cares that there are so many singles? I mean, every day on Spotify, there must be like 1,800 new releases every day. So, you sometimes feel as if you're just making a drop in the ocean, and it's not even a good one. It's kind of goes out, your music goes out there into the void. But the advice would be is to kind of look within yourself, and and just say, yeah, I'm doing this, I'm doing it because of me, and because I exist, and it's a journey. That would be my advice.
Yeah, actually, that question was supposed to come later right here too, but thanks for answering that.
That's okay.
Yeah, I think we might have to jump the format around, but that's all good. But
that's all cool. That's all good, Brian.
Actually, yeah, I did want to lead into this question right here too. I wanted to know how you guys made the song, for instance, or I guess all your songs that you've done so far. So, like I said, do you guys normally start with a riff and then do lyrics last, or do you sometimes have the lyrics and then try to build the music around it?
Well, because I don't write lyrics, although I'm actually now embarking on a new project where I am going to start writing my own songs, it normally starts with a couple of chords. So, for example, I'm writing a new song at the moment, and it just starts off with 2 chords. And then I think I instinctively know that it has something. And then now I'll try and structure, a song around it. So, I'll think about a verse, and then I'll think about creating a chorus and a bridge if it needs it. But generally, it starts off if I'm playing on piano, and I always use piano. It'll just be a couple of chords, and I just like the sound of them. With guitar, it's pretty much the same thing. I do actually, probably because I'm not the world's best guitarist, probably start off with a riff. So it'll be a riff, but probably more often than not, it'll be a couple of chords. Again, I'll just play and I'll noodle. And what I do is I use voice recorder on my iPhone. So if I know that if I get an idea for a song, I'll just switch it on and then I'll just record it. So a bit of a noodle, and then maybe I'll actually use that later because I don't want to lose the idea. And it's the same with piano. I'll just have my DAW on. and then I'll just play something. If I like it, I like it. With Studio One, I think it has the ability, for example, if you don't hit the record button, it actually remembers what you can record. So you can actually then reveal what was recorded, even if you've forgotten to press the record button. So that's actually a very good function. But generally, the answer to your question is that it probably comes from a kind of a riff, but generally it will come from just a series of chords. And I don't write lyrics yet, so but I'm actually getting there. But today, funny you should mention that, because I want to write lyrics, and I've set up a journal or diaries or a filing system on my iPhone to capture ideas about lyrics and songs. And I'm also actually going to carry out a couple of songwriting exercises, just generally just jotting ideas down to see where that goes. So I'm keen to actually become a songwriter in my own right, because Stuart's always been the songwriter for the band, but I'm going to branch out on my own and write my own songs.
That's a pretty cool endeavor. And I guess real quick, what do your lyrics cover? And just from this band, that's Sfumato effect.
Oh, well, I mean, basically, I'm going from the album, Where Are the Angels, basically was a song about, obviously, the pointlessness of religion and how religion causes conflict, and the contradictions between religion. That's what the song Where Are the Angels are all about. Sweet Scented Cherry Bomb was a song written by John. And when I first heard it, I thought it was a song about a broken relationship, because he keeps talking about a sweet scented cherry bomb. And of course, cherry bomb, Marilyn Monroe, wasn't like that at all. Apparently, the cherry bomb was a synthetic drug. And John won't mind me saying that obviously he took it quite a lot and then became addicted. So really it was his battle with drug addiction with this synthetic drug. I can see your face. Stuart's not here, but he won't mind me saying, was about a story of personal grief. Because unfortunately he lost his first wife, so he wrote about that. Born to be Free was a song written about obviously just nature and our connection to nature and the freedom of nature, and our connection to the earth. So it's full of lots of imagery of nature. The sea, has seagulls in it, it's kind of back to earth kind of. I don't really know how to say it. It's kind of back to earth kind of song. Pandora was a song that Stuart wrote about somebody he knew. And it was really a song about a very confident, successful woman, a modern sort of 90s get up and go kind of woman who knew what she wanted, knew where she was going, knew how to get it, and was very high society. Mr. Heartache was a song that Stuart wrote about finding somebody and starting to date them, fall in love with them, but somehow feeling that he wasn't good enough, and he eventually would be dumped. And The Girl from Devon was really about just a tribute to his newfound love. Then we wrote a couple of songs. Don't Come Easily from John was about basically the struggles that he had in a relationship with somebody who had difficulties with issues around mental health. And Fire, That Keeps on Burning, was a song written about Stuart. And I was going to mention this in the podcast, so I won't go on too much, but I can tell you my personal story. I suffered from bile duct cancer in 2020, and this was during the pandemic, so it was quite tough. So, the prognosis for this type of cancer isn't good, but fortunately, I was treatable, and I had surgery, and I survived, where most people don't. In fact, only 5% of people with the type of cancer I have live longer than 5 years. So, but I'm a survivor. So the song Fire, and Stuart had medical health issues at the same time. It was a happy coincidence. So it's a song about sort of, struggling, fighting and surviving. I am the fire that keeps on burning. So it was just a complete accident that he had health issues and wrote the lyric. Excuse me, and I could relate to it. So anybody listening, contact the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation in the US, and they do sterling work. I'm looking to become a mentor for their program too, to try and help people who've gone through similar things. So if anyone's listening, go onto their website and do what you can. Anyway, that was a quick plug. And the last song we've written, I Don't Know Who You Are, is about Stuart's relationship with his father. And basically not really knowing who he was. That sometimes I think it happens quite a lot these days, is that you grow up in a parent environment, but you don't really connect with your parents. You kind of grow up and almost they're kind of strangers. Henceforth the song, I Don't Know Who You Are, but now it's too late, because he's old and obviously has health issues himself. So there are the song ideas in a nutshell. Sorry to go on about all the songs we've written. And quite. So we write about deep stuff. I mean, the album if it was ever printed onto vinyl, we would actually call it the dark. We'd have side A would be the dark side, and side B would be the light side, because the dark side deals with Where Are the Angels, religion, Sweet Scented Cherry Bomb, drug addiction, and I Can See Your Face, obviously confronting grief. And the other side, with Born to Be Free, Pandora, and Mr. Heartache, and The Girl from Devon, is the lighter side, because those songs are a little bit more, the themes aren't so dark. So, yeah.
I see. Actually, it's almost like a Star Wars sort of like little twist right there. Got the dark side and the light side, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of good versus evil. It's the age-old conflict, isn't it? Star Wars, Game of Thrones, Shakespeare. I mean, it's all sort of, it's the age-old good versus evil. The Omen with Damien Thorne. God, I'm going back.
I was gonna say, forget about the F-bomb too. You guys are also dropping the C word too. So I mean,
yeah, exactly.
So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, the C word, the big C word. So, so that was, that was quite difficult for me going through COVID, because at the time, my wife couldn't visit me in hospital. Basically was on my own. So, the hospital was in lockdown. It wasn't a good experience at the end of the day, but I survived, and that's what that song is actually about.
I see. Actually, which part of this cancer here, I guess, which part of your body does it affect?
It's the bile duct. So the bile duct, I'm not going through an anatomy lesson, but the bile duct runs from the liver. They run inside the liver, and they run into the duodenum, and then it meets with all the digestive juices from the pancreas, and then obviously breaks down your food. So what can happen, of course, it's very, very rare. I think there are only like 5 cases per year in 100,000 people. So we're talking about a very, very rare form of cancer. And because the prognosis is so bad, because it doesn't present itself until it's well advanced normally, because you just go about your everyday life, and then you only get symptoms when you're looking at stage 4 and stage 3, and then the cancer is virtually untreatable. You're talking about palliative care, just extending your life rather than curative care. So fortunately, I was in the position where I was at stage 2, and surgery was an option for me, and that meant that obviously I had a curable solution. So I'm very, very fortunate in that respect. But it's one of these rare cancers. It doesn't get as much publicity. All cancer is absolutely awful, but it doesn't get obviously the attention that, say, breast cancer or prostate cancer would get. So, and there, of course, the survival rates are much higher. I mean, you're talking about survival rates over 5 years of like 85% or even higher. The type of cancer I have is very rare. So, quick anatomy lesson and. A quick detail. One of the signs is you probably get jaundice, where you have yellowing of the skin of the eyes. That's probably one thing you need to look out for if anyone's listening. General fatigue, obviously discomfort in the liver area, and other symptoms to do with obviously waste products. So you need to check obviously the coloration of that, and that's also an indicator as well. So get to your GP if you have any of these, because it literally could save your life. And a lot of these cancers are quite aggressive, unfortunately. So timing is of the essence, because the difference between being resectable and not resectable obviously has implications on your ability to live longer. So there.
Let's see.
Again, Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation. I don't know what the website address is, but if anyone's listening, I'm sure you can go on there and donate and find out more about it.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for being, I guess, an ambassador or a little spokesperson for it. Or
no, it's that's the thing. I mean, in the music, has been very therapeutic for me. But of course, I want to try and give something back. So I'm one of the lucky ones. I managed to survive. So I want to give something back and try and help those. And as I said, I've actually been in contact with the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation in the US, and I'm hoping to become one of their mentors and get on their mentor program and just speak to people and try and just help them. Because like most things, not a lot of people know about it. For example, what surgery will I have? What will that be like for me? What are the implications? How do I go about getting a right specialist, seeing the right people who understand, the kind of illness that you have? So that's what I want to do in the mentoring program.
All right, sounds good. And I guess whenever you do become a mentor, good luck out there, mate.
Thank you very much indeed.
Of course. All right. So, Tony, we briefed the questions here pretty good, and we'll jump into the fun ones, and then that'll be a good way to wrap up afterwards. So, ready?
Yep, ready.
Okay. So, start with the first one, I guess. So, what would you consider is currently your favorite food?
My favorite food is chicken.
Chicken. Okay. Is there a sort of chicken? Right.
Chicken, just any chicken, any kind of chicken. Chicken with rice. Chicken and rice, actually. I love chicken and rice. In any form. Doesn't matter how it comes to me.
Now we want Chinese. Let's get Chinese. So there we go.
Yeah, I'd have chicken in Chinese as well. I don't mind. But I just like chicken. Chicken's my favorite food.
All right, sounds good. There's a lot of protein in it too, so that helps. So, right.
Don't like red meats. I avoid red meat, and I like chicken.
You like to go with crispy chicken every now and again, or you always want to go with a grilled chicken?
I'd probably just go for good old plain old chicken. Not too greasy. I don't eat the skin, and I just eat the meat.
I say the skin's the best part, man. What are you doing?
Yeah, I know. I got to do that. But remember, I've got problems with my digestive system. So, I mean, basically, it's all been rewired and replumbed. So I have to avoid all fatty foods for medical reasons. But you're right. The skin is the best bit. But unfortunately, I have to not eat it because it's not good for my health.
Okay, fair enough. All right. And for the next question here, what would you say is currently your favorite movie or TV series?
My favorite TV series. I don't watch a lot of TV series at the moment, but I do like The Big Bang Theory, and I think I've watched it through at least every single episode about 5 times.
Did you have a favorite movie, or you're not big into movies?
I've never seen an episode of Game of Thrones. I've not seen one episode because for me it's just like Shakespeare but with dragons. So if I want to read about all this kind of stuff, I just read a good old-fashioned Shakespeare tragedy play, and then that will do it for me. The other question was films. What films am I watching?
It was movies, and then sometimes, I know, in Europe, I think they like to do more of TV series. So that's why I said movies or TV series. But do you have a favorite movie?
Movies, do I have a favorite movie? Well, that's a very, very difficult question to narrow that down. I kind of, now you've really, really got me. My favorite movie. I can't actually say that, but there are certain genres that I like. For example, I do like the original Star Wars movies, episode 4 through to Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. The rest I can completely forget. The story ended at the Return of the Jedi. That was good enough for me. I didn't need to know what happened to Anakin Skywalker when he was a kid, and I certainly didn't need to know what happened after, Luke Skywalker got old. So for me, that's not really a thing anymore. And all the Disney spin-offs as well is not my thing. I do like the Godfather trilogy, although the first one, of course, is an absolute classic. And any 80s movie. I'll watch any 80s movie. I don't care whether it's Top Gun, whether it's Dirty Dancing, whether it's Roadhouse, whether it's, I'll watch any 80s movie because the 80s was my decade, right? I'll watch any of those. There's just so many different movies. Movies with Harrison Ford, I like an awful lot. Presumed Innocent was a good movie. I probably think the last movie that I really like The Matrix because I'm an IT guy, right? So I like The Matrix, the first one. And again, that was fine. The whole story, basically Neo then is in the Matrix and he gets it. That was fine. I don't know why we had to have Matrix 2, Matrix Revelations or Revolutions. And that was probably the last movie that I really, really liked. The scariest movie I ever saw was the original Alien movie, the very, very first one. And I really liked that movie because it reminded me of old Hitchcock movies. For example, Psycho from the Hitchcock. You never see the violence. It's all kind of implied, right? So the horror and the shock comes from not actually seeing all the gore, but just from the implication that something terrible is happening and the suspense. And the first Alien movie was like that. You never really saw the alien right until the very last scene. And then even then, you only just got a glimpse of it. So I think it was a very clever film, and it was quite scary because all the horror and all the tension was actually suggested. It was implied. And I thought that was much more sophisticated than, say, watching Saw 1 or Saw 2 or Saw 3, which I would never watch and have never watched. So, yeah. The Bourne trilogy, I like Jason Bourne as well, the original ones. I think they're good movies too. So, and any movie with Denzel Washington, of course, has got to be worth watching, right? I mean, the guy's just a genius. So, yeah.
Probably love The Equalizer, which is like what I would call the black version of Jason Bourne in this case.
Yeah. I like the original Equalizer, and the second and third one again was, I quite like the first one. It's a little bit violent in places, but I think it's just about watchable. But that was Denzel Washington. Is a totally talented actor. I remember that movie he did called Philadelphia with Tom Hanks, which was a superb movie. I do like the old classic black and white movies as well. I can watch these forever. I can watch Citizen Kane, which is, I think critics call the greatest movie of all time. I don't know, but it is a great movie. And I watch all these old black and white films. I don't mind watching some of those either.
Right. It's a little bit of an extensive list, but nonetheless, good choices.
Yeah, sorry.
Nonetheless. No, you're good. All right. And first off, do you drink at all? I don't know if alcohol kind of affects how your digestive pattern is now.
Yeah, I don't drink alcohol anymore. I haven't actually had any alcohol since 2019.
Okay. I guess way back in the day when you were able to drink, what was your favorite alcoholic drink then? And I guess what's your favorite non-alcoholic drink now?
My favorite non-alcoholic drink now is water. Just plain old water. And my alcoholic drink when I was drinking was just a straightforward pint of lager, which is British lager, which is in Germany it's called a Pils. So it's not a dark beer. I like cold beer. And generally it was this kind of Pils kind of lager kind of. I never liked dark or warm beers, so I wouldn't drink Guinness or anything dark.
I'm going to say, I think I know why you also moved to Germany. They also have the best tasting beers in the world.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I would say.
Yeah. Germany has laws. Germany has laws about beer making. I mean, you can't just, it has to be done strictly to a particular type of formula, and the ingredients have to be exact. So Germany has so many different types of beer, and they all are very good. Pils is kind of, the light kind of beer. It's not dark. It's normally cold, but there are so many different variations of it, and it's on a regional basis as well. So you can go here to the Rhineland, and they have a particular Pils, and then you can go to Bavaria, and they'll have another different type of Pils, and they all have a slightly different taste. But I haven't actually drunk since 2019. I don't drink whiskey or spirits. Never did do. I never drank whiskey or vodka, or I'm just not that kind of. It doesn't do anything for me.
All right, fair enough. And for the last fun questions right here, and I put a little twist on this. Here's how it goes. What would you say is your currently favorite song in the mainstream world, and then one from the indie community?
Right, my favorite song from the indie community at the moment, actually, because I'm listening to a lot of indie music. Let me just give this a bit of thought. I probably would say my favorite song from the indie community at the moment is, there's a band called Dinky from the West Midlands, and they have a song called It's Not About You, which is a bit of a power pop ballad, but I think that's my favorite song at the moment. And from the mainstream community, I don't listen to a lot of mainstream music anymore, because running my own radio station means that I'm listening to a lot of independent music, from independent artists who don't necessarily have contracts. They're a bit like us. They're just creating their own music in their bedrooms or in small studios. So mainstream at the moment, I don't really like mainstream music, but I've been listening an awful lot recently to a band called London Calling, and they're not even that modern, they're not even that current. So I've been listening to a lot of their music too.
So wasn't that The Clash?
I was a big Clash fan, but I like the early Clash when they were sort of like really into punk, and then they rocked the Casbah and became a little bit commercial. There's a saying actually, people who were true punk, they said, punk died the day Clash signed to CBS. So once they went major, that was the end of punk as an ethos. Yeah, and then it all became about bowing down to the music industry, the big A&R reps, and obviously making money. But the first Clash album is one of my favorite albums of all times. Janie Jones, White Riot. The second album was called Give 'Em Enough Rope, which was okay. And I guess that London Calling, actually, that's the name of the album, is also a classic album too. I mean, that is a classic album. I will, but there again, of course, they were signed to CBS, so the purists would say, Clash, they portrayed the whole ethos of punk rock. They're now just big stadium boys, but it's still great music.
That's for sure. It's just music. You don't need to discriminate or say like they're mainstream just because they change the sound a little bit. But
I agree.
Each their own too. So, okay. So Tony, we reached the end of my podcast right here. Normally, that advice or message of hope question was meant to be the last one here too, so that's why we changed up the format a little bit. But we have reached the end of my podcast right here. And,
sorry, say that again.
Sorry. The previous question I had asked when Stuart was getting ready to leave, the whole thing about message of hope, that sort of deal, as well as the advice. that was meant to be the last question, but
Oh, I see. I got it. Yeah. Okay.
so we changed the format up a little bit here too. But we have reached in my podcast right here. We almost talked for pretty much a good hour and 50 minutes, give or take,
Yeah.
here to there. So, but I guess before we close, do you have any final words? Any shouts you want to give?
No, I just want to say thank you for having us on. I mean, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you, and appreciate you taking the time to take an interest in us, and I think that's absolutely awesome. So, thank you very much. There are a couple of people I'd like to give a shout out to in the independent community. Anybody who hasn't heard of Joe Boo from Rhine of Fire, he's in so many bands. Give that guy a look. Bands like Voodoo Mirage, Rain of Fire, and so many bands he's involved with. They call him Joe Boo, the man of many bands. There's also, I'd like to give a shout out for a band in the UK called Distance from Zero. They're from Manchester, fantastic band, and they are post-punk pop band. And last but not least, a couple of bands in Germany, the Multivariate Outliers. They're worth checking out. They're from Heidelberg. And there's a very good French composer called His Theory, is the name of the band. And he's just released a new, fantastic new instrumental album. These guys are well worth checking out. And I'd give them 2 minutes of your time. And there's another band called Paralandra, which are a hard rock band. Don't know where they're based. They're a touring band. They're really seriously good. I would actually if you like that kind of hard rock genre, I would definitely give them a listen. And our good old friends Factory of Art from Berlin.
Yep. Actually, I mentioned His Theory, Multivariant Outliers, and then Joe Bowie from Ring of Fire. I've interviewed those guys. So
yeah, they're really, really good. I actually we can't do it because of time constrictions, but I did on my radio show do a Sunday show, a live show with Joe. The guy is so motivational, and he really is enthusiastic, and in the community he's just absolutely totally there and encourages it. He actually encouraged me when I first started my radio station, said, man, I like what you're doing, thanks for playing my songs. Because I had this thing basically where I decided I always was going to end my radio show with one of his songs, and I still do. So I play Rain of Fire at the end of every single, not that song, but Desert Caravan, Call of Viking. I kind of play his music every week. He's a great guy. So a big shout out to Joe.
That's for sure. And just real quick for the audience, can you list what social media and streaming platforms you guys are on so they can check out your music and maybe reach out?
Yeah, you can reach out to us on Facebook. That's primary, and Bandcamp. So you can find us on Facebook anywhere. That's Sfumato Effect. And also we have a Bandcamp site too. And that's probably it for social media because, that's probably all we need to say is that I'm kind of running my own artist profile, and I'm running the Ross House of Music, so that takes up all my social media activities. And Stuart and John aren't really IT savvy, so we did actually have, we were all over social media everywhere, but it's just not sustainable. I mean, it's just so much to do these days. So you can go to Bandcamp and you can stream our music. It's all free. You can even download it for free. We name your price, so if you just want to download it. I would like to say actually that the single "I Don't Know Who You Are," I'll completely rephrase that, "Fire" that keeps on burning, is that any money that actually is collected, we're going to forward on to the various cancer charities that Stuart and I are championing. The AMMF in the United Kingdom, the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation in the US. So you can download it for free, but if you want to donate something or buy it, the money will go there. And then on Facebook, we have a Facebook page. That's Sfumato Effect.
All right, sounds good. And good man, nonetheless. So thank you so much.
Exactly.
But to close out like this, so everyone, my guest today was Tony Ross, who had to close it out because Stuart had also joined us, but he had to step out because his family dinner time, even though actually if it's 5 hours, man, he's eating dinner late. It was around 8 o'clock. So, all right. Nonetheless, we had Tony and Stuart on today, the part of the band, and I think I'm still going to struggle with this. I think everybody still struggles with it, but it's that Sfumato effect. So,
yeah, that's good.
Okay, good enough. That's as far as I'm going to go to try to pronounce it too. I'm not going to try to break my back over it. So, all right. But anyway, go check these guys out on the socials. Go support them all streaming platforms right out there too. These guys are doing a lot right there. Even at old age, they're still kicking ass. So, all right. So Tony, wish all you guys the best going forward there, mates. So tell Stuart I said good luck out there. So he'll stay safe because it's a crazy world out there, as I'm sure you've seen. Rock on. Gute Nacht, Deutschland.
Cheers, Brian. Thanks very much.